Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, Yevamot daf Lamed Gimel. We're going to begin on the top of Lamed Gimel, but off the very first line. So we were discussing in yesterday's daf, there was actually a three-way machlokas when it comes to the concept of Isser Chalal Isser. According to Rav Yossi, up until this point, we understand that he holds Ein Isser Chalal Isser, but we will say Isser is Chalal Isser when it comes to an Isser Mosif. An Isser Mosif is a situation where more people are Usser in one woman. In that situation, Rav Yossi will say Isser's Chalal Isser. Rav Shimon holds Ein Isser Chalal Isser, even by an Isser Mosif. Rav Shimon is the most strict, and he says that it never works. And therefore, if you have two Isurim, you're only going to be chayav on one of them. It doesn't make any difference, even by an Isser Mosif. The Tanakama, on the other hand, says that we hold Isser Chalal Isser, even if it's not Isser Mosif. So that said, the Gemara asks as follows, and we brought down a few different situations in which a person did two things wrong, such as a non-Kohen who worked in the Beis HaMikdash on Shabbos, a Baal Mum, who's not a Tamim, and he served in the Beis HaMikdash, again, with a blemish, and he was Tameh, or a Zar She'achal Malika, a non-Kohen who ate through Malika, in which, if it wasn't done by a Kohen, the eating, so then perhaps there's also an Isser of Nevela. So in this, the Gemara asks, what exactly is this machlokas? So, but Isser Koilel, the Olibra of Yossi. So, what exactly is Isser Koilel? So, as we said, when it comes to Isser Mosif, that means where more people are usher in one woman. So, for example, you may only be usher, as we said, for example, to chamoso, to your mother-in-law. And let's say she's not married. And after she gets married, there's an Isser Veishas Ish. That's called Isser Mosif, because what happens is now more people are usher to this woman. Well, it's not just me, now everyone is usher to her. That's Isser Mosif. Isser Kolel is where the same person is usher in more women. So, according to Rav Yossi, when it comes to Isser Mosif, as we established, he holds that we hold Isser Ischal Isser. But when it comes to Isser Kolel, he holds Ein Isser Chal Isser. So, perhaps that actually is a machlokas. V'olib Rav Yossi, what he holds. Rav Chia Savar, the Rav Yossi, Isser Koilel Mechayiv Tarti, that not only when it comes to Isser Mosif are you chayiv twice, but even if it's an Isser Kolel. Bar Kapar Sarvel Mechayiv El Echada. It's only chayiv once. So my Isser Kolel, Ika. So what exactly is this Isser Koilel in this case? Hacha. Bishlam Azar, Mikara. So he's a non-Kohen. So Mikara Shari B'Malacha. So he's allowed to do work, V'Aser B'Avoda, but he's not allowed to do the avoda in the Beis HaMikdash. So let's say it's a Friday. And then what happens? Asil Shabbos, and then all of a sudden it's Shabbos he's doing malacha. So in this situation, it's the same person's usher to something else. So migu, it's not that it's usher to more people, but this same person has an additional isser. So migu to come mitzvah b'malacha, since it's usher for him to do malacha on Shabbos, mitzvah nami b'avoda. He's also not allowed to do the avoda. That's a case of isser koel. Balmum mikara. When it comes to a balmum, so mikara shar b'achila. A balmum is allowed to eat kachim, however, asa b'avoda. If you're a balmum, you're allowed to do avoda in Beis HaMikdash. Itmi, let's say now this balmum becomes tamei. Itmele migu to come mitzvah b'achila. He's not allowed to eat kachim because he's tamei, so mitzvah nami b'avoda. So he's also there's an isser avoda. So those two make sense. It's an isser koilel. Ella malika. What's the din malika when you're doing the slaughtering of this bird of the schatas of a non-Kohen eats it? B'vasachasi the mishkachas law. B'isser koilel or mishkachas law. We only find a case of b'vasachas, that it happens at the same time. But we don't find a situation of Isser Kolel, that it basically happens at two different situations. So you can't tell me that the machlokas over here is talking about Isser Koel, because we don't find this situation of Isser Koel when it comes to this case. El Kimifli Isser Bavas Achas. Therefore, instead, we're going to say that the machlokas has to do with Bavas Achas. This is question 9. Zar Sha'och Malika Im Beis Isurav Isser Mosif O Koel O Bavas Achas. So this is clearly Bavas Achas. That was question 9. Okay. So therefore, perhaps the machlokas is regarding to if they happen at the same time, whether you're going to be chayiv twice. V'lib Rav Yossi, Rav Chia Savar, Rav Yossi b'Iser Basachas b'chayiv Tarti, that you're going to be still chayiv even though it happened at the same time. We'll see how those other cases could possibly happen at the same time. You're still going to be chayiv twice. Bar Kapar Savar lo mechayiv el achada. When it comes to Basachas, you're only going to be chayiv one. V'hacha my Iser Basachas ikacha. So how do we find Basachas? So now we go through the 3 cases again. Well, the third case we already know, we already established as Basachas. How about the first 2? Zar Shashimish b'Shabbos. You have a non-Kohen that worked in the base of Mikdash on Shabbos, Kagon. The Izi Shtei Saros, so he produced the Shtei Saros b'Shabbos, on Shabbos itself. So before that he was a Katan, and now all of a sudden he establishes that he is a Gadol. The Havil who Zoros v'Shabbos b'Hadi Adadi. So therefore, his status of being a Zar, as well as not to be able to do the Avoda, and in doing Isser, because he's a Gadol, and Shabbos happens at the same time. So this is Rashi. Hayom b'Shabbos zu dehashto leiko meimer kedol el mikar shori b'malacha v'asa b'avoda. We can't say a case where, he's allowed to do work, and it's also to do avoda dehalu chal shum Isser olav ad hayom. There's no Isser that fell upon this boy until today on Shabbos. The Isser Zaros, the Isser Shabbos, Yachad Bo'u. They happen at the same time. Avlehev Shtei Cyrus B'choil Kadim Zaros Alei. But if he produced his 2 hairs on a weekday, so that's not going to be Vasachas, because he's already going to be considered a Zar at that moment. And therefore, the establishment of a Zar and the Avoda happened on Shabbos. So that's a case of Vasachas. Similarly, Balmum Nami, in the case of the Balmum who is served Batuma, we say that could go into Isis Shtei Cyrus. Again, he proved that he was a Gadol. Rashi says, even if he became Tameh before he produced these Beis Saros, Uvatoch Tumato, Umumo Hevi Shtei Saros, and he produced his that he was a Gadol then, Uvishas Haba Cholu Shnehen, Shar Shnehen Hayatloyan Alav. Even if he was Tameh before, or even if he was doing work before, so it doesn't matter because he's only Chayiv once he's actually produces his Shtei Saros. Alternatively, if let's say he cuts his finger with a Tameh knife, so he became Tameh and a Balmum at the same time. So let's look at question TB18. TB18 asks the following: either it's chal b'vasachas, he brings 2 Cyrus b'soch zman shahayu tumaso umumoy taluyin bo, or again he cut his finger with a tummy knife. Okay. Weiter. The Bishlam Rabbi Chia, I can understand Rav Chia. So we're saying maybe this is the machlokas. Rav Chia holds that according to Rav Yossi, it's be'isr b'vasachas, you're chayav 2. So I can understand Rav Chia ki asne ledidei lib Rav Yossi, ki asne lebar kapara lib Rav Shimon. So el lebar kapara Rav Chia shekuri meshakiri. How could he make a shvu about this? It's hard to understand. How could he make such a statement? Ella kimifli be'isr b'vasachas. The whole machlokas, as we're saying, is b'vasachas lib Rav Shimon, but it's not lib Rav Yossi, but it's lib Rav Shimon. Why? What was the problem? So let's look at Rashi. El lebar kapara di omer Rebbe alib Rav Yossi asne kula. He said the Rav Yossi is lenient. In kain alib deman asne l'Rav Chia chumra V'chila bar kapar shekuri mishaker Rav Chia v'lo asni Rabbi machayev shtayim. So he said, because again, according to Rav Shimon, he's very strict. And he says, in Isser Chal Isser, even by Isser Mosef. So perhaps, therefore, what we're actually establishing is not like Rav Yossi, rather like a libid Rav Shimon. El Kimifli be Isser B'Vasachas libid Rav Shimon. Now, Bishlam Rav Chia Ka Mishtaba. Reason why he made this shvua, that, and he says you're chayiv for B'Vasachas for 2, Lafuki Rav Shimon. Mechezke. So he's coming to exclude him. Says Rashi, Dahavi Maksakinan Le Rav Shimon Lakula. Ishtabel Rav Chia de Vasachas Moidi. That even though it's true that Rav Shimon says that Ein Isser Chal Isser, which is a tremendous kula, however, he'll say that when it comes to the din of Bas Achas, that at least Rav Shimon will be Maida, that you actually will be Chayiv too. Even though when he holds Ein Isser Chala Isser, not by Isser in a regular case, or even by Isser Maisiv, so he's a very big Makel that you can't be Chayiv twice, but B'Vas Achas you're Chayiv too. So therefore it makes sense that he's saying this statement. El Bar Kapara Lamule Lishtaba. What exactly is his shvua, that he's only chayiv 1? We already know that that's the shita of Rav Shimon. He always holds you only chayiv 1. So kasha. So it's not really like he's saying anything, because again, according to Rav Shimon, he always says ein iser chal iser. So maybe the same thing by vasachas. So you only chayiv 1. Now bishul bar kapara kiyasni Rabbi lididei libed Rav Shimon kiyasni Rav Chia libed Rav Yossi. So you can just say that one was like Rav Shimon, there's like Rav Yossi, and that could be the machlokas if you're chayiv 1 or 2. Or Rav Chia bar kapara shekuri kumashaker. Again, the same question. So Rav Chia ki asni Rabbi lididei tarte lifter asne. So since these two cases are also by an Isser Kolel, so that's the reason why he mentioned it, because lididei tarte lifter asne. He was only talking about the other two cases. Look in the bottom Rashi. But tarti bizarre shishimish b'shabbos so bal mum shishimish b'tuma the mishkachas lo ben alidi koil ben alidi b'vasachas kinamol el. We can't establish the case of Malika as a case of Isser Koilel, but these other two cases in Isser Koilel. So therefore, he's only focusing on those two cases. But you're right. When it comes to the other case, you can't say it's a case of Isser Koilel. It's only a case of B'Vasachas. As we continue to Lam Gimel Mebez, Visser Koilel Asne V'Libd Rav Shimon V'Chazli LeBar Kapara, and Rav Bar Kapara saw the third case of Ozar Sha'acham Malika. V'Aidi the Damila, since it's comparable in certain ways, Erva B'Hadaihu, he linked them together. However, once he analyzed it, he realized that you can only say this case of Malika only a situation of Vasachas. Since that case of Vasachas, the other two is also could be a case of Vasachas. So, in other words, mistakenly, really, you're only putter on 2 only, because only 2 of them is Isser Koel. But by the other case, B'Vasachas, perhaps you would actually be Chayiv Shtayim. So that's how we'd understand. Look at Rashi. Avu Malika lo yasni lifter klal lo mishkachas lo bekoil el B'Vasachas v'hasem Rav Shimon moidi. That you would be Chayiv 2 times for Vas Achas. So it's true. Even though he lumps them all together, the truth is the dinim are not the same. By the first 2 cases, there's an Isser Koilel and an Isser Mosef. In that situation, he holds you're only chayiv 1. However, Rav Shimon will say, if it's a case of Vasachas, you're chayiv 2. Which again is what we're going to say l'maskan. According to Rav Shimon, you're going to be chayiv Achas by an Isser Mosef and an Isser Koel. You're going to be chayiv Shtaim on B'Vas Achas. which of course Rav Yossi also will hold. Rav Yossi holds that you're chayiv b'vas achas and also by Isser Mosef. Meiseve zar sheshimish b'Shabbos. So the question is like this: you have a non-Kohen that works on Shabbos, ubal mum sheshimish b'tuma. So those are the first two cases. Yeshkan mishum zaros umishum Shabbos umishum bal mum umishum tuma. Div Rav Yossi. So Rav Yossi holds that you're going to be chayiv too for both of those cases, because he holds that when it comes to a case of this is a case of Isser Kolel. So we see that not only by Isser Mosif, normally Rav Yossi says in Isser Chal Isser, but by Isser Mosif we established Isser is Chal Isser, and we see here also that when it comes to Isser Mosif, Isser is Chal Isser. Shimon Omer Ein Kan El Mishum Zar Subal Mum Bilvad the Ilu Malika Shira. However, when it comes to the other third case, that was left out. Laman Shira Ilem Rav Yossi. If it's coming to say it's excluding Rav Yossi, that Rav Yossi holds in the case of Malik, you're only chayiv one. Hash Rav Yossi be Isser Kol Mechayiv Shtayim. He already says that even when it comes to Isser Kol, you're chayiv two. So Isser Vasachas, my boy, if it's happening at the same time, certainly you're going to be chayiv two, right? So according to the Shita of Rav Yossi, you are going to be chayiv two all the time by Isser Mosef, Isser Kol, and Bavasachas. Elav Rav Shimon, uve Isser Koilel hu depater. It's only when it comes to Isser Koilel, and for that matter, Isser Mosef, you're going to be pater. You only chayiv once. You only be chayiv one. However, Avol be'Isser Bavasachas mechayiv, you're chayiv two times. So Tiyufta the Bar Kapara, Tiyufta. This is actually Tiyufta on Bar Kapara, who does not make this distinction and says that even in that case, Rav Shimon would hold your chayiv one b'vas achas. Zar sheshimish b'Shabbos b'mai. Ibashchita, what service did this guy do? Ibashchita shchita b'zar kshera. We know a non-Kohen is allowed to do avoda of the shchita that we learned in Gemara Brachos by Shmuel and Elia Kohen. Viba Kabbalah v'hoylacha. Let's say he did Kabbalah and Halacha, which is avoda that only Kohen can do. But the problem is, that's not an avoda, one of the Lamatas Malachos, Tiltu Ba'almahu. Iba HaKatara, maybe he was makta the Katiris, which is burning up, that maybe is an Isser. So, V'em Rav Yossi, Havaru Lav Yatsasa. We know, when it says, L'Savar Eish B'chol Moshe Moseichem, according to Rav Yossi, it's not L'Chalik, it's L'Lav. There's only Chi of Lav. It's not one of the Lam, it's not on the same caliber, according to Rav Yossi, as the other 39 Malachos, the other 38 Malachos. So Amar Rav Acham Yaakov, what did he do wrong? So B'Shchitas Parashal Kohen Gadol. We're talking about the Shchita of the cow of the Kohen Gadol, which took place on Yom Kippur, and Shchita, it says, is an Av Malacha. Umishum Zaris Nami Ika Kedivir Oimer B'Yoyim Perik Taraf Kalpi Shchitas Paru Bazar Psula. When it comes to the shchita of the cow of the Yom of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, that is not allowed to be done by a non-Kohen. Normally it is. However, the Gemara learns in Mesachtes Yoma that when it comes specifically to this avoda, the shchitas par, it cannot be done by a non-Kohen. So he did the avoda, and he did an Isser Shchita, which is one of the Lamatas Malachos. Ukadibri Oimer Shchitas Partial Kohen Gadol Bazar Psula, according to that Shita. So Ihachi Mayirizar. Why you want to mention the case of a non-Kohen, a field Kohen Hedjinami, right? So L'chayri, you should say the same thing. It shouldn't make any difference, because if it's only the Kohen Gadol who's allowed to do it, so why does it mention a zar, which is mashma, a non-Kohen? The answer is shizar etzel kaimar, which it's something which is strange to him, which is two ways to read it. Either enachanami, then you're right, he's a Kohen is a zar in this avoda, or alternatively, we're talking about someone who is a non-Kohen who's foreign to the avoda. Maskav lo Rav Ashi midi chatas katani. It doesn't mention chatos, o lavi katani. El Isuri Ba'alma Kachashiv. So my nafkamina, L'kaivro bein Rishayim Gemurin. Again, the whole point of this is not to say that this person is actually going to be chayiv certain malach, chayiv achatas or whatnot, but rather it's to decide where this person should be buried among the Rishayim Gemurim. Okay. All right, before we see the next Mishnah, let's make sure there's no other questions here. TA 20 TA 16. Zar sheshimish b'Shabbos, balmum sheshimish b'Tuma, zar she'achal malika, elu mehem havi iser koil, umahu koilel. So this is actually Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph. So the first two cases, Zar Sheshimish B'Shabbos is an Isser Koilel. Actually, let's see how he adds it in. Zar Sheshimish B'Shabbos Neser B'Malacha, Balmum Sheshimish B'Tuma Neser B'Achila. Okay, so that is. I was gonna say a little bit more than I needed to, but that's the idea behind this. Okay. But again, when it comes to a Zar She'achal Malika, that is not an Isser Kolel. That's only a case of Bavas Achas. Okay. So, L'maskanas HaGemara. Rav Yossi holds in all three situations, you're going to be chayiv two times. You're going to be chayiv, it's going to be, we hold Isser Chal Isser if it's an Isser Mosif, if it's an Isser Kolel, or Bavas Achas, if it happens at the same time. According to Rav Shimon, he says no. You're only chayiv once when it comes to Isser Kolel. Also by Isser Mosif, the exception where it's L'divrei Kol, that you're going to be chayiv two, is Bavas Achas. Next Mishnah. Shnayim. So you have two men. Shekidshu shtei noshim. You Mekadesh two women. U'eshas kanisasan l'chuppah. And when they got married, hechlifu es shel zeh l'zeh v'es shel zeh l'zeh. We're going to see somehow they got confused as to who's married to whom. There was confusion. It was not a b'mezid situation, and the Gemara is going to discuss three reasons why this has to be a b'shogeg. So we say that because you took a man's wife, so therefore you're going to be chayiv to bring a carbon for that. And let's say they were actually brothers, so then you're also going to be chayiv mishum eshes ach. You took your brother's wife. And let's say these two women also happen to be sisters, then mishum isha elachosa. You're taking you're taking the sister of your wife. Nidos mishum nida. So just to throw it in, you can be chayiv for nida as well. And then the Mishnah says, when it comes to their return to their original husband, once it's been calculated and figured out, we have to wait 3 months. Hain, because perhaps they'll end up getting pregnant, and therefore there will be this whole problem as to who the child is. Says Rashi, Shotasul balehen shemamu baros hain uvenehem amzerim ubeinan havchana bein zera kashul zera puzzle. We need to know the difference between these kids. Shlo yitul haubarim bebalehem. So we shouldn't again say that this is who the husband is. Okay, we need to know and verify who the husband is. So you wait 3 months. Let's say you were married to a katana, so then you can marry her right away because she's not fit to have a child. If this is a case of a kohanes, so then she's going to be possible from truma. The Gemara is going to explain that on next daf. So the Gemara asks, and we already explained the maskana behechlifu midabrishyaskinan. How could it be that they exchange wives? So you're talking about wicked people? It's hard to imagine. Lesu ha detani Rabbi Chia harikan sheish esri chatois. He said it's possible that because we just mentioned 4, that it's possible in this situation there's a situation of maybe as much as 16 chatas offerings. So even mezid mika carbon. The only time you bring a carbon is b'shogeg. So this case can't be talking about a case of a mezid. Amar Yehuda tani chuchlufu. You're right. Instead, use the language as it was exchanged, and it was done by accident. If there are little kids that you were born, you married, let's call them 11 years old, she can't get pregnant, so then you can return to her husband immediately. The iba mezid misharia. So how is it shaykh to take her back if in fact if it was done b'ratzon? Well, you can go back to your husband. Halukasha. Pitoi katana oinis ninhu. The notion of being mafata, a katana, like the seduction of a katana, that falls under the category of she was like ma'anes, and therefore it's like against her will. But oinis b'Yisrael mishra shari. When it comes to a girl who is a Yisrael, so she's completely mutter. So that's the reason why, if she's a katana, you can take her back. That's not a problem. You can take her back immediately. El de katani mafrishin oisan shloisha chadashim shemamu barois. So it says, oh, okay, you have to wait 3 months before you can take her back, because what happens if she gets pregnant? Hein ha halav mubaros sharian, which is mashma. If let's say she didn't get pregnant, which means she's still a tashmish, so she's mutter. Now the iba mezid mishari. I understand, if this was done b'mezid, then she should be ushered for you to take back. Doesn't make any sense. So I think where it's in this situation, it's allowed because we're talking about it was done b'shogeg, and therefore that's the reason why she could you can take her back. Okay, let's see. We're gonna stop there. Let's see if there's a couple more questions. Okay. Let's see. Nothing on TA. Question 10. So stam shekitshu shnei nashim. So ma hochrach de b'shagig mari masnisin. So there's really 3 answers, but he says mida chayzrin acher gimel chadashim. The fact that we allow her to come back, kishol nimsu mubarais. If we find out that she wasn't pregnant, so why would that be allowed? It must be because it was done b'shogeg. Ad kan.